Alright guys, so this is going to be a brief little video. What I'm going to do is get the truck running. When I pulled the truck into the garage, it was running, but it wasn't really quite staying on. And then I did take it around the block. And at first when I would get to a stop sign, it would want to die. So I just kept going, and then on the next drive, when I would give it some gas, it would kind of sputter and want to turn off also. So I'm just going to give it a tune-up and see if that fixes the issue. I'm going to change the carb filter here, and then this inline filter here that we have. I'm going to drain the gas from the tank as well and do an oil change. So hopefully these filters solve the issue. If not, I'm going to have to pull the carb off and take a look at the jets, make sure those are clean, and we'll go from there. Alright, so I got that fuel line off and both filters. You can compare those two and see how much cleaner the new one is there. This doesn't look too bad, but I'm still going to replace it. It's only a few dollars. And then moving on to the filter that goes into the carb. This one, trying to pass some air through it, there was some restriction. So hopefully this does solve the issue. And then as far as the fuel line goes, the new line, I'm just going to cut to the same lengths that were on there and see how it runs. So I have the inline filter back on the truck. The carburetor filter though that I purchased, actually, even though it looked like it was the correct one, it wasn't. So I had to go around a few auto parts stores in town and finally was able to grab one that was the correct one. I had to go to Napa. They seem to always have stuff for these older trucks. The filter that I got was this gold Napa filter, part number 3049. Alright, so I have both fuel filters installed now. The inline fuel filter and the carburetor one. It still has a little bit of a gap there, but hopefully no leaks. What I did was I primed the engine and had the fuel pump some gas up to the carburetor. The way I did that is I just pulled the plug here to the coil and cranked the engine over till the filter here filled up with gas. So what I'm going to do now is turn it on and see how it goes. Give it a few pumps. Seems to be running okay and idling okay. Still warming up. So now that I have the whole front clip back on the truck, I drove it around the block a few times on different days, and it's still running a little rough. It doesn't want to stay on when I come to a stop sign. It kind of wants to sputter out and die. Prior to me working on the truck, it sat for almost a year, I believe, since the transmission went out. But what I'm going to have to do now is pull the carburetor off, check the seals, something I've never done before, so this is going to be new to me, but I'm going to start with that. So after removing the carburetor, this is what I found. The gasket is in bad shape, so I'm going to replace that, but I'm not quite sure what this carbon buildup is there. This does go down quite a bit, so I'm not sure if that has anything to do with the ERG system, but anyways, going to clean up the manifold, replace the gasket, Make sure it's got a good seal, and then I'm also going to replace the vacuum lines when I get the carburetor back on. So after pulling the carburetor, I checked the jets just by pumping the gas that was left in the bowl. The left side jet seems like it's a little bit clogged, but nothing to really restrict it. So what I'm going to do is pull this apart, check the seal here. I'm not sure what that's called, but I know there's like a little diaphragm in there. I recently changed this, and then going to take a look at that and check the idle quality screws and see how far they're backed in. As I'm pulling apart the carburetor and checking everything seems fine, at least to me. As I'm going through it, like I mentioned, we had the carburetor rebuilt about 2 or 3 years ago when I really was driving the truck as my daily driver. So it ran fine before the transmission went out. But one thing I did find right now as I was pulling it apart, I'm not quite sure what those two little holes are right here, these and then that one right there, but in that right one I found this. This was just hanging out just like that all the way in. I'm pretty sure that's not supposed to be there, but I think my issue is these right here. I believe the gas comes through here and then the jets are right there. It's going to be really, really tough to see, I think, but looking at these little pinholes, they seem like they're a little bit clogged. So I'm going to try and clean those up. I'm still going to pull off this and check the diaphragm piece that's in there and go from there. So next thing I did was pull the float out, and as you can see, there is, I'm not sure what that gunk is there, but that is what I believe was clogging or is clogging these right there. You can, let me see if I can focus on that. You can kind of see it right there that it's just plugging that up. So I'm going to try and stick something in there and clean that up and get these off. I'm going to pull those, if those are the jets, I'm going to pull those out and see what it looks like in there. So the carburetor is reassembled and back on the truck. I ended up going to my local auto parts store and buying some carbon choke parts cleaner. Sprayed that in the hard to get areas where there was some gunk. If you remember, there's that almost like brown sugar clumpy buildup in the float bowl or in that area. So clean that all out, put it back on the truck, changed a few of the vacuum lines here on this left side, and then of course the gaskets, the one that goes from the manifold to the spacer or in between there, and then the gasket that the carb sits on. I had actually come across another video on here regarding high idle, kind of the same issue that I was having with the truck, that it wouldn't even warm once the engine got up to operating temperature. It wouldn't, or it would stay idling really high. That video mentioned checking any other issues as far as vacuum leaks or the distributor here, because if it was running correctly before, which it was, it might not necessarily be the carburetor. So what I did after I saw that, but at that point I already had the carburetor off, but I'm glad I got to it and cleaned it up, was I pulled the cap off and checked the points. Now you can see that little white corrosion on all of, it's actually on all of them. There was actually like a brown spot over that, so it was a little bit caked on. So I just took a screwdriver, popped off that little piece of corrosion, and then took some sandpaper to all of them, and that actually ended up being my issue. So now the engine runs really well. I'm gonna go ahead and crank it over for you. I already got the engine running this morning, so it's a little bit warm, so it should crank right over. But So I've actually driven the truck to work a few days so far. I plan on driving it to work quite a bit. I only live about 2 or 3 miles from work. The next few things I plan on doing or in my next few videos is cleaning up the engine bay. I'm kind of dealing with all this wiring here, how that's a little bit exposed. So I'm going to try and clean this all up. Maybe take out some of this extra, wrap it all up so it looks nicer and clean. Figure out what all this extra stuff is and what I can get rid of. I also want to remove the smog pump. Pretty sure that does nothing at this point and hasn't worked for who knows how long. I've pulled this hose off here with the engine running and it has no effect on it, so I'm going to pull that off eventually and plug that down there. Paint the valve covers and just give the engine a little bit of a cleaning, just so it looks a little nicer in there. So that'll be on the next video. Thank you guys for watching.